Welcome to Weight Loss and Wellness for Real, the podcast where people like you get the practical solutions and support you need to permanently lose the physical and mental weight so you can feel better and live the life you really want to live in the body and mind you really want to be living in. If you're looking to overcome your stress eating, overeating, binging behaviors, and move to a place of food and body freedom, as well as find more meaning and more moments of joy in life, you are in the right place. Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here and for listening. I'm Heather Heynen, your host, and today we are going to dig into a topic that I believe could be really life-changing for so many of us, and that's how to move from that lifetime of dieting to finally thriving with a really healthy, peaceful relationship with food, with our bodies that can last for the rest of our lives. So I know a lot of you out there have spent decades starting diets on Monday, battling cravings, labeling food as good or bad, or yourself as good or bad if you happen to eat something, feeling guilty or ashamed after meals. This episode is especially for you. I've been through all that. If you've been listening to this for a while, you know that I've experienced that all firsthand. And so this is as much of an episode for you as it is for me kind of revisiting how I finally got into that space of freedom with food and freedom with my body. And today we're going to talk about why traditional dieting keeps so many of us stuck, what it actually looks like, to heal your relationship with food, and then just some real practical strategies as I always do. I just think it's always important to give you practical strategies that you can start using right now to really step into a new way of living, one where food is a blessing and not that battleground that so many of us are used to. So let's start with a really difficult truth. Dieting as we know it sets most of us up to fail. And here's why. Dieting really disconnects us from our body's natural signals. Most diets tell us what to eat and when, not based on how we feel, but based on a set of outside rules. And even more than that, what happens is these diets that are out there that we tend to follow, they're one size fits all. And we really now understand that each of us is really unique in our circumstances, in our biochemistry, in our hormones, in our ages, in how we move, all those things. So if we have a one size fits all diet, it is definitely not going to work for everyone. And then it also disconnects us from our bodies in the way that we really stop being mindful and listening to our hunger cues, our fullness cues, and what our body actually needs in regards to nourishing foods. A lot of times what happens is when we diet, we really truly lose touch with our fullness cues, our hunger cues, and also even with our need or want for nourishing foods, right? Because one part of this is that when we're eating maybe a lot of processed foods on a diet, right? Those sort of things, we really, our body's neurochemicals change, our biochemistry changes, and all of a sudden we're not craving or we're not wanting those vegetables, or we're not wanting that salmon or that fish, the foods that we know really, really nourish our bodies. When we're kind of a little bit not in the dieting game, we can learn how to really feel what our cues are and understand what our body is looking for. So one example here would be how we kind of get disconnected is just think about, this was me forever. Think about all the times you ate a salad when you were still hungry, right? Like you're just going to eat the salad even though you're still hungry, but that's all I can have on the plan, so that's all I'm going to have. Or maybe you forced yourself to skip a meal when you were super hungry because you were doing, I'm not supposed to eat until whatever this time is. And then also what happens with dieting, I've talked about this over and over and over again in this podcast, but dieting really creates that all or nothing mindset, which is so detrimental to long-term health, to living in a body long-term that is the size that feels best for you. that all or nothing mindset truly is what ends up in a very psychological roundabout way self-sabotaging our behavior. And again, I've got tons of episodes on that, so you can go back and listen to some of that. I won't get into detail here, but basically, it's kind of like when we mess up, like we don't have cookies on our diet plan. So we eat a cookie. Then this was my diet mentality. Well, I blew it, so I might as well eat the whole bag of the cookies, the whole sleeve of the cookies, whatever it is. So this really leads to cycles of restriction and binging, or restriction and overeating, that damage both our self-esteem, how we feel about ourselves, our confidence level with this, but it also really damages our metabolism. So on a bodily, physical level, we're also really losing out there as well. And then dieting almost always ignores emotional eating patterns, which again, talked about a ton in this podcast. Most plans only address what you're eating and not why you're eating. So if food has become your comfort, your distraction, your reward, no diet rule book is going to fix that. We got to do some deeper work to really shift, bottom line, to shift our identity and what our relationship is with food. And that deeper work is what actually can heal then that relationship with food. But if we're just dieting, we're never going to get there. Always going to eventually get back into our habits and our patterns with food and using it for comfort or distraction or whatever. Bottom line, trying to change a feeling. It's always those of us who have disordered eating or unhealthy relationship with foods. It's always about trying to shift a feeling. And then dieting teaches us not to trust ourselves, right? So every time we follow some outside plan, instead of really tuning inward, we kind of chip away at our own self-trust. And the ironic part of this is that in order to be free in your body, to live in the body, the healthy body that you want to be living in, the size of body you want to be living in, you actually need self-trust in order to get there. Okay, so let's talk about what thriving looks like, a new relationship with food. Let's look at what it actually looks like. So in that healthy relationship with food means you're really eating foods that fuel and satisfy you without fear or guilt. And so that's, if you can really get into what that feels, there's such freedom in that to be able to eat foods that fuel and satisfy you without fear or guilt. Another thing is you really trust yourself to eat when you're hungry and stop when you're full most of the time. None of us are going to be perfect with this. There are times we are going to eat because we're not hungry, or we're going to eat to over that fullness mark. That's part of life. That's part of how it goes. But most of the time, we really are eating when we're hungry and stopping when we're full. And we trust ourselves to do that, right? We're not in that anxiety state of, oh my gosh, now I'm going out to eat with friends tonight. And that's where I often would overeat. And oh my goodness, now I'm going to overeat and then I'm going to break my plan. It's all that kind of dialogue that goes away. Another thing is you're going to know that one meal or one snack does not define your health or your worth. So, we may eat something that typically would kind of send it like, oh no, now I just, went off plan, or, ate something I didn't want to eat. And when you get into a healthy relationship with food, you really never have that chatter going on, because one meal, one snack does not define your health, nor does it define your worth. And then another part of this is you really start to enjoy food as a way to nourish your body and your life, right? It's kind of like this freedom with food. And sometimes people get into, oh yeah, well, freedom with food, I can eat whatever I want then, and then I'm going to be in the body. That's not at all what I'm saying. It's when you get into this space, you're not craving the overeating. You're not urging to have all that food on the binge, right? You're really just in a peaceful place of enjoying food as a way to nourish your body and your life. And then, it's always really important to remember thriving with food and having this healthy relationship with food. It is so not about perfection. And so we could think about it as it can be more about connection. So you go out for a birthday dinner, you truly enjoy the meal without obsessing over calories. You wake up the next morning, you eat a healthy breakfast and move on. There's no punishment, no shame spiral. It's the kind of peaceful, powerful relationship with food that I'm talking about. Okay, let's get really practical. So here are the real steps to shift from dieting to thriving. So you want to really, really, really work on ditching the food labels. So you have to catch yourself when you're thinking of foods as good or bad, or yourself as good or bad. I cannot tell you how many times when I'm working with clients and they come to me, and I'm like, how was your week? And then they'll say things like, well, I was really good for this many days, but then I was bad for this many days. And so we really have to work through that because they are still really in that space where they are going to, using that language is that clue. They're still in that space of where they're going to end up sabotaging their goals because they're going to end up feeling guilty and ashamed. You really have to do the thought work to interrupt and replace the thoughts. If you're having thoughts of foods as good or bad, if you catch yourself saying something is good or bad, or you're good or bad based on what you ate that day, you have to do the thought work to really stop that pattern of thinking. So we want to get more in the habit of, how does this food make me feel? So one of the real practical strategies, and you can keep a journal on this, but is after every meal, something you eat, asking yourself, how does this food make me feel? And kind of go into, maybe it's, an hour after you ate it, maybe it's the next day. How do I feel about what I ate yesterday? And not just how do I feel about myself, but literally how physically do I feel? Some of us are so into a lot of processed foods, and we definitely know now processed foods make us feel, think, our mental, emotional health, it can be really connected to all of that. And so if I can get someone to start paying attention to how they feel in regards to what they're eating, often if they're eating, well, I'll just use the example, a lot of processed foods, it can be other things too. But if they're eating that way often, and I have them do this exercise and they pay attention for a while, they find they feel terrible. They feel terrible physically, mentally, emotionally. And so just gaining that awareness can be really helpful in shifting into a more nourishing way of eating. And then too, just thinking about, some foods just fuel us better. Some foods are fun and joyful, and some foods fuel us better, and some foods are both. And that is just how it's going to be. And it's okay to know that some foods maybe are not as fueling or as nourishing, but they're fun and they're joyful and they're part of a social celebration or something like that. And yep, there are other foods that really fuel us and nourish us better than others. Both can have a place in a really healthy relationship with food. Okay, so here's a little mini exercise you can try. Next time you eat something you used to label as bad, pause and ask yourself, what am I feeling? And how does my body respond? So no judgment. This gets back into stuff I talked about. We haven't talked about this in a while, but back to some of the initial episodes I did of really working on just being curious, just really being curious. So again, asking yourself, what am I feeling? How does my body respond to this? No judgment in it, just curiosity. All right, a second thing on a practical level we can do is really do the practice and the work to reconnect to hunger and fullness cues. So before you eat, really checking in, am I physically hungry? And then halfway through a meal, checking in again, how full am I? And I often with clients use it's a real simple hunger fullness scale. You can Google it and find it online. I'm sure there's probably different ones out there, but bottom line, 0 is like you're absolutely starving and 10 is painfully full. And so you want to aim to start eating around a 3 or a 4, which is really true hunger, right? You don't you don't want to get to starving, right? You want to aim to eat around 3 or 4 where you're truly hungry and stop around a 6 or a 7. That would be comfortably satisfied, but you're not overstuffed, you're not over full. So this is a practice, and I have my clients practice this who have dulled those sort of hunger fullness signaling scales. So yes, so trying to use the hunger fullness scale, practicing that at every meal, snack, whatever, can be really helpful. And then again, it's not about rigid rules. It's about learning your body's language again. And here's one of these things where it's not about rigid rules, because for some people who I'm working with, they actually really need to be eating every 3 to 4 hours. And there's different reasons for that. Sometimes if you are dealing with binge eating, it's really important to get those clients, because often they'll restrict during the day, and then they're having the binge in the evening. So with those, and this was me forever, I need them to eat every 3 to 4 hours. We're not worried about hunger and fullness cues quite yet in the journey, right? So there's going to be times even this strategy is not going to be useful for you. So again, just remembering this isn't all rigid rules. It's just about figuring out where you're at and what's going to work best for you to gain that food freedom and that real healthy relationship with food. And then number 3, I would just say address emotional eating very gently. We have to be very gentle, very self-compassionate. I preach about that all the time. Food often becomes a coping mechanism, and that can be okay to a point. Again, we're not black and white here, but when eating is the only coping tool, it can create so much suffering. So a strategy would be you can build a comfort menu that doesn't involve food. So some examples might be a hot bath, a walk outside, calling a friend, journaling for 5 minutes. So when you feel that emotional hunger, not physical hunger, you can kind of go to your comfort menu first. And if you still choose food afterward, trying some of these things, that's okay too. The goal is really about awareness and not perfection. And that awareness itself will eventually shift you into that healthier relationship with food. Now, every time I throw the strategy out there, like, what are some other things that could bring you a little comfort that you could go to first before the food? So we're trying to create that pause. I always want to throw out there these things, a hot bath, a walk outside, calling a friend, those sort of things. They are never going to feel as good as eating the food. They're just not. There's way too much biochemistry, hormonal responses that can go on instantaneously when we consume food. And so those, your things on your comfort menu that might bring you a little bit of comfort, it's never going to do the same as eating food. And you just need to know that going in. I'm never, if people are telling you that's all you need to do, you need to do these other, like take a hot bath instead or read a book, give me a break. Never going to be the same. That doesn't mean these can't be a great little strategic way to create pause between you and the food, or you and the binge, you and the overeating. That can then help your nervous system get trained to be able to have that pause. And that can, over time, really help with your healthy relationship with food. Number 4, you can focus on adding and not subtracting. I talk about this one a lot too. So instead of obsessing over what to cut out, really ask yourself, what can I add that makes me feel nourished and strong? Hey, everyone, just a real quick interruption. I'm really excited to tell you about PhysiVantage, a company I have used for years and years and who I have recently partnered with in an ambassadorship for the podcast. This is one of the highest quality supplement companies out there. And the best part is I know the owner and his commitment to quality in his products. I actually interviewed the owner, Eric Hurst, on the podcast a while back, and you can hear him talk firsthand about his commitment to quality in episode, I think it was 171, if you're interested. Also in that one, there was a ton you can learn about aging optimally and performing at your best. I think when people make the decision to add some supplements into their daily habits, they don't think often how important it is to know and vet the companies you are buying from. There is no regulation on supplements. And so when you buy something, you really have no idea what you are getting. You really want to vet the companies heavily so that you know what you are spending your money on and exactly that you're getting exactly what you believe you are buying. So with PhysiVantage, you really don't have to think about it. What you buy is the highest quality of what you can get. I use the PhysiVantage PowerPlex plant-based protein complex. And no, I am not plant-based, but I'm not doing well with dairy right now. And whey protein causes some issues for me. This is something I'm working on. But in the meantime, in order for me to get in my optimal daily protein amount for maintaining lean body mass, keeping my appetite in check, and for athletic performance, I have to supplement with a protein powder. And this is my favorite. I alternate between vanilla and chocolate. And this plant-based protein complex is different than others out there in that it includes all the essential amino acids. So it's
like a whey protein, has all the essential amino acids. Most plant-based protein powders don't. It also has creatine and beta-alanine in it. These are huge bonuses. Plus, PhysiVantage plant protein only has a few carbs in it, where most plant protein powders have lots and lots. If you do well with whey protein, then use their whey protein blend. It's also really great. PhysiVantage has lots of great products that you can check out, but another one that I find so helpful for my goals and lifestyle is Redux HP. And this is an all-natural pain relief, which helps to improve recovery from rigorous exercise, supports a healthy inflammation response, combats muscle breakdown, and improves performance. But the best is it's an all-natural way to relieve aches, pains, and muscle soreness. This has saved me from popping ibuprofen for the couple of migraines I was getting twice a month, as well as when I had a big climbing or biking day and would wake up sore. So if you don't know how bad things can get from popping Ibu, do a little research. Avoid Ibu, in my opinion, really important for our health long term. So anyway, using this product instead can be a really great way to lessen pain naturally and inflammation. You can get a discount on any PhysiVantage product by going to PhysiVantage.com. PhysiVantage is spelled PhysiVantage. So like physical advantage, PhysiVantage, and use my code Heather Heynen. Capital HEATHER, capital HEYNEN, all one word, no spaces, Heather Heynen, and you will save some money on any product you choose. I also have a link in the episode description below that you can use. Check it out and see all that they have to offer.
This one works so well. It's something about the psychology behind when you add something versus restrict something. So don't think about restricting anything. Think about, how can I add some more colorful vegetables? How can I add more protein? How can I add more water? Add more joy around meals, like sitting down at a nice table instead of eating on the run. Things like that. So always think, if you're wanting to change your habits around food, always think, what do I add in? What do I add in to nourish my body? You don't ever want to be thinking, what do I take out? What do I restrict? Here's the thing, when you add enough nourishing food, nourishing habits, the not so helpful stuff naturally crowds out over time. I see it time and time again. And then number 5, this is really important, talk about it all the time, practice self-compassion over criticism. So every time you eat in a way you regret, instead of beating yourself up, you really want to practice saying, I'm learning, I'm human. One choice doesn't undo all my progress. I can make next best choice at my next meal. Self-compassion is rocket fuel for lasting change. And there's so much psychology behind this on why this works. We have tons of studies on why this works. And I've gone into detail on that. Lots of past episodes that you can look for if you want to understand, or if you're like, I don't believe it. I'm just telling you, self-compassion is that it's that rocket fuel for lasting change. Here's an example. One of my clients, after 30 years of chronic dieting, decided to just focus on adding more protein and listening to her hunger cues. Within months, she lost weight without feeling deprived. And even more importantly, for the first time in decades, she said, I actually like myself when I eat now. I mean, that right there, I can remember every time I ate, hating myself, just ashamed of myself, right? So that freedom of being able to eat and actually like yourself, that is what thriving is about. That's what a healthy relationship with food is all about. All right, so if you take one thing away from today, let it be this. First of all, you are never broken. Diet culture taught you to mistrust your body and yourself. Healing your relationship with food is about remembering you are trustworthy, and you have to build that within yourself, within your relationship with yourself, to show yourself you're trustworthy. By the way, that gets into where I've talked before about really doable goals. That's why your daily goals have to be doable, because we have to build that trust. We have to show ourselves we are trustworthy. Also, you can listen to your body again. It is skills training. Everybody can learn a skill with practice. You can listen to your body again. You can nourish yourself without punishment. You can create a life where food is joyful and peaceful. The truth is, it doesn't happen overnight, but it will happen with small kind, consistent steps. Thanks so much for joining me today. If this episode resonated with you, if you're ready to start thriving with food instead of dieting, share the episode with a friend who needs the message too. The two of you can maybe support each other on this journey. And if you haven't yet, hit the subscribe button. I've got a lot more coming your way to really help you thrive in your 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and beyond. Until next time, friends, stay well, stay kind. Remember, you deserve a life where food fuels your dreams, not your doubts. All right, we will talk soon.
The information in this podcast is intended to provide a broad understanding and knowledge of healthcare topics. This information is for educational purposes only and should not be considered complete and should not be used in place of advice from your physician or healthcare provider. We recommend you consult your physician or healthcare professional before beginning or altering your personal exercise, diet, or supplementation program.
Did you know you can find a lot more help from me on my website? Go to heatherheynen.com. Heynen is spelled Heynen, and there you will find links to my online courses, how I work with clients one-on-one as well as online with my coaching and counseling services that I offer.